Morning guys, welcome back to the channel. I want to thank you guys for the response on my last video. Based on your response, I've decided to go ahead and try to install these HeliBar risers on my bike. I'm going to take some photos of before and after so you can see the change that it's made on the bike. I'm not going to video the whole install because there's so many other videos out there that do it really well. But I do want to show you the before and after, and I do appreciate you guys for responding to my last one. It made me feel much more comfortable about putting these on. So let's get started. Okay, this is my current riding position before the HeliBars are installed. Sitting comfortably, normal. Arms are okay, as I said. They're just a little bit forward. I think it would feel more comfortable on my shoulders and my elbows and my back if they were a little closer to me. So this is the before, and I'll show you the after. First step was putting tape on the center console and then prying up these little tabs. They're just connected by a pin and a grommet, so they pop up. Next we're going to go in there and take out that 5mm screw and the push pin that's on the other side right there. Alright, we have the two screws out and the two push pins, easy enough to pull out with your fingers. Got them out. Might be good to use a magnet when you're grabbing these screws because they'll drop down inside the bike. And then you move the center console forward and lift up, and it's connected at the bottom by these connectors. You leave them connected, protect your bike, pull it back out of the way and just let it sit there because this is going to be where you're working right here. This is the cover I was talking about yesterday that they want you to cut to fit the new risers. I'm probably just going to remove this and leave it off. I don't feel comfortable cutting it. It's pretty thick. I've seen other people try to cut it. Sometimes it looks okay. Most of the time it doesn't. So I'm just not going to cut it. Okay, I've removed that plastic cover. And then using a 14mm wrench, removed the bolts on the left handlebar and let it just sit here on a rag to protect the paint, because we're going to have to get up in here next and move this bracket. It's what I was talking about yesterday. You can see there's a little bit of clearance here. We need every bit of that so that we have clearance back down here later. Okay, so we got to loosen the bolts that hold this together and push it up and tighten it back down so that we no longer have this gap and this is raised a little. Also, one other thing, took an 8mm socket, loosened this bolt right here that holds this whole wiring harness together, and rotated the wiring harness counterclockwise so that it almost touches the steering nut here, and then tightened it back down. It provided some gap and working space for these wires coming around here. Alright, I got to tell you, moving this thing up, it didn't move much at all. I mean, it's in there pretty good, and I loosened up every bolt it said to loosen up. Let me show you. That's one bolt right there that you loosen up. And then there's an upper bolt up here that you loosen up. And then you're supposed to press up on this thing with your hand while you tighten that thing back up. Well, that doesn't move up that much. Matter of fact, I don't see a whole lot of change at all. And I can't get it to move any further. So let's just see what happens when I put it all together. Next step is we're going to install the left riser. The two larger holes here at the bottom, we're going to line up with these two silver holes here. like so. And we're going to mount it using this hex head provided bolt and torque it down to 20 foot-pounds of torque. All right, got that installed, and I want to show you the original holes are right here. So that was the angle of the handlebar before this was installed. Now the handlebar is going to be up here in these holes. So you can see the different angle. It's going to pull the handlebars back towards the rider from this to this. Okay, now we're going to mount the left handlebar right here. These two holes, going to line up with those two holes. And we're going to mount it with this button head screw, also provided in the kit. Also torque it down to 20 foot-pounds. And on the left hand side, you want to make sure and get these wires below the risers. You don't want them pinched in there. Be very careful not to pinch them. You want to orient them below the risers and then bolt in the handlebar. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Got the two button head screws in, okay? And on the back side, you can see that the wires are below the riser that you installed. Below the riser, that's on the left hand side. Torque it down to 20 foot-pounds. And so when you're torquing this down, you want to come over here so that you can brace your body up against the right handlebar so the wheel doesn't move when you're trying to torque. So 20 foot-pounds of torque sure doesn't feel like a lot for handlebars. It also doesn't feel like as much tension as it felt like when I was taking off these bolts to start with. But there must be a reason why the instructions, and everybody I've heard talk about it, say 20 foot-pounds of torque, so that's what I did. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing on the left with a slight difference. Once the riser and the handlebar is installed on the left, the normal wires are going to go below like you did on the right, but this hydraulic brake line is going to go above. Now they're tied together with a zip tie here, but it's flexible enough that I think you can keep the wires below the riser and the hydraulic line above. So that's what we're going to do. Back in a second. All right, left one installed, torque down to 20 foot-pounds. It even says it on the instructions right here on the device itself. 20 foot-pounds of torque. I've got the hydraulic brake cable up on top. Got the rest of these cables not pinched, free and clear, not pinched, but down below the riser. That's the way it says to do it. All right, let's start putting things back together, minus the plastic cover that goes on here because I don't want to cut it. All right, back in place now. To reinstall the center console, you bring it up all the way almost to the dashboard here and set it down on that little hook. Sets down pretty easily and you can feel when it's in the right place, and you pull it back towards the gas tank and that sort of locks the front in place, and then you come back and reinstall the push pins on either side first. And it's a little difficult getting this back in because of the plastic pieces that are under here, but if you work it for a little bit, you know, it'll go in eventually. It's not a big deal. Put the push pins in first and then put the 5mm screws back in. And when you're screwing those in, keep in mind they're just screwing into a plastic like nut down there, so don't over tighten those at all. Just enough to make it firm so this thing doesn't move. It's not moving now. The last step of the install, since I left the cover off, well, regardless of whether I left the cover off, is to put a cover, a decorative cover over this nut hole and the one on the other side that came with the kit. All right, clearance looks okay in there. Even when I turn the steering wheel, I don't see any rubbing or anything close to rubbing. It's a little close, but it's not touching. That's the good news. And everything's bolted down solid. So same thing on this side. When I turn the steering wheel, you know, this right here is the closest gap and it's not touching So maybe moving this thing up, even though I could only move it up barely, you know, maybe helped a little. So I understand why that's in, why that's in the instructions. Okay, let me do some measurements now and show you what my seating position looks like. Okay, using the same measurement points now. Looks like it's about 15 1/4 to the same point on the handlebar. If I square it up on both sides, in other words, the other side, the right hand side, is the same distance, 15 1/4. So we went from 13 something to 15 1/4. Let's take a look at the riding position. All right, this is my new riding position. You can tell that they're back a little bit. It's not a drastic change, but it is a more comfortable feel for me. I'll have to get it out on the road to tell for sure, but I think it was a good move for me. Kind of short, arms not super long, it feels better. Elbow angle is better. Stress on the shoulders I don't believe will be as bad. And clearance, I was afraid of clearance. Clearance is a-okay. It's overall good. And so this is what it looks like from the top side. The button cover's in place. Plastic's not in there, but you know, it's kind of got a steampunk look to it. I kind of like it without the cover. And I didn't have to cut the stock cover, so we'll keep that for later in case I change my mind or sell the bike. You know, I'll have that piece whole. All right, well, I'd just like to thank you guys once again. You know, what a great community the motorcycling community is in general, and specifically the Goldwing community. You know, I reached out yesterday and had some questions about this install, some concerns. I got a lot of feedback. Man, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for that. I'm pleased with the results, and it's only because of you guys that I move forward, so thank you so much. Also, thank you for watching my channel. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. It's free of charge, as I've said before, and it helps my channel. And anyway, I am, as I said yesterday, now in full preparation mode for leaving for the Faroe Islands next weekend. It's going to be a great trip, some amazing scenery. I cannot wait for the product that comes out of this trip. So I'll bring it to you guys in a couple of weeks. You guys be safe, ride safe, and God bless.